Hello, and thank you for joining us today in our study of the book of Psalms. Today we are in Psalm 3, and once again, as we've seen in the first two Psalms as we've examined them, as we come into Psalm 3, we have a bit of a different type, a different structure, and a different message that's going to be discussed in this particular psalm. It's again not an overly long psalm, so we'll go through our reading and our lessons from this particular psalm in the same video. So let's see what David has to say in Psalm 3. Beginning in verse 1, we read, Lord, how they have increased who trouble me. Many are they who rise up against me. Many are they who say of me, there is no help for him in God. But you, O Lord, are a shield for me, my glory, and the one who lifts up my head. I cried to the Lord with my voice, and he heard me from his holy hill. I lay down and slept. I awoke, for the Lord sustained me. I will not be afraid of 10,000s of people who have set themselves against me all around. Arise, O Lord, save me, O my God, for you have struck all my enemies on the cheekbone. You have broken the teeth of the ungodly. Salvation belongs to the Lord. Your blessing is upon your people. Here in Psalm 3, it's not very lengthy, and yet there's a very important purpose and a very important point behind the words of the psalm. But before we get into that, as we move into our lessons for today and looking at the psalm, I want us to look at a couple of things that are maybe generally considered more background material than they are necessarily uh, the direct emphases of the psalm itself. And that is the fact that I want us to begin with the background of the psalm itself. Because this is the first of these psalms that has a title attached to it in the general readings that we have. And you'll notice I didn't read that at the beginning, even though in our text it was the top line. But it is described as being a psalm of David when he fled from Absalom his son. And so when we understand the circumstances around which these things take place, then we will also understand a little bit more about what's being discussed in the psalm. This is a psalm of David, and it's going to be written in the days in which Absalom has rebelled against him. Absalom is David's son. And this is actually going to take us back to 2 Samuel chapter 15. And if you would like to delve into the things of that chapter a little bit more, I will have attached to this video in the description the link to our videos going through 2 Samuel chapter 15. But you have a time that has come where David has been thrown out of Jerusalem. Absalom has taken over the kingdom. He has rebelled against his father. He has gained the backing of many of the influential and important people in Israel, and many of the multitudes are now following Absalom. And they believe that David is defeated. They believe that the Lord has turned his back on David and that he will no longer help David. And that's the premise behind this particular psalm. And so you have to understand a little bit about the background of what's going on to really get the full gist of, and maybe the full emotion of what the psalm is bringing out. Now, another thing in the psalm that you see that I didn't read necessarily or I didn't vocalize is the idea of the term Selah. Selah is a Hebrew term, and you're going to see it used many times throughout the book of Psalms. But it is a term that simply means a lengthy pause. And so it was a reading term that when the psalm was quoted or when the psalm was sung, that you have this break, you have this pause. You don't go directly from one paragraph into the next in the way that we would formulate it. And so, if you'll notice in the reading, I just took an extended pause before starting in with the next verse. And that's what it's designed to be. It is meant to be more of a reading reminder than it necessarily is intended to have some significant point within the framework of the text itself. And so I wanted to make sure to mention that within the confines of how we read the Psalms. But then the third thing, and the most important of everything that we've discussed, is how David talks about the idea of salvation belonging to the Lord. As you go through the psalm, he talks about, though there are many that have increased who trouble me. He's been forced to leave Jerusalem. He's been pushed out of his own kingdom. And many are those, he says, verse 1 and 2, who rise up and say, there is no help for him in God. God has turned his back on David. He will not help him anymore. But in that second paragraph, he talks about the fact that he knows that God hasn't left him. And he knows that God will help him. He says, I cried to the Lord with my voice, and he heard me from his holy hill. And then in the last paragraph, you have the deliverance of the Lord. And the statement made at the end of the psalm that really culminates everything that David's talking about, and that is the fact that salvation belongs to the Lord. It is all in the hands of the Lord. Now, generally, when we think of salvation, we think about it from the eternal perspective, and certainly eternal salvation belongs to the Lord. But here, David is talking about it from the standpoint of salvation from his turmoil, salvation from his difficulties, salvation from the problems that he's dealing with at this particular time. And that salvation also belongs to the Lord. It is the reminder that God is with us and that God will take care of us if we will fully and truly and completely put our trust and our confidence in Him. It may not always come exactly at the timing that we would like or exactly in the way that we had expected. And it certainly didn't for David in 2 Samuel chapter 15 and following. But it did come. And God did show David once again that he was with him. These are some of the things that I've noticed as I examine Psalm 3. I hope that they've been beneficial to you. Next time, we will come back and we will begin examining Psalm 4. But until then, I hope you have a wonderful day.